Hi there everyone, welcome to our first week of West Bergen cooking videos. I'm very excited to start this series off with you, and what better way to start it off than by making a nice big lasagna. This is sure to be a huge crowd pleaser that everyone's going to love, whether you're a big family of 5 for me, and my grandma and grandpa make 7, or you're just a family of 1, 2, or even just yourself. Now, in the interest of time, since making a lasagna takes more than an hour, I've pre-made my tomato sauce, but I'm going to be making a more condensed version of tomato sauce on screen. So if I say different proportions for the larger tomato sauce and the smaller tomato sauce, that's the reason why. But in the interest of time, let's get started making our cooking. So for the original tomato sauce, you're going to use 2 cans of whole or diced tomatoes. My family likes to use diced tomatoes because they're already diced and we do not have to dice them up. But you can use whole peel tomatoes as well. These are 2 28-ounce cans for the larger tomato sauce. You're going to need 4 15-ounce cans of tomato sauce. Ultimately, these provide extra tomatoes for the sauce as well. You're going to need 1 5-ounce can of tomato paste. This tomato paste comes in alongside your tomatoes. You're going to need 2 medium-sized onions. You're going to need 1 cup of canola oil. And you're going to need 2 teaspoons of sugar. Now to start making the smaller version of the sauce, I'm going to start chopping up my onions. So I'm going to take one of my onions and start chopping them up. As my family likes smaller onions, we're cutting them to smaller slices like so, but you can cut them up thicker if you would like to have thicker onions. Be sure not to cut yourself when cooking, as no one wants to cut themselves when cooking. So first onion chopped. I had this partially chopped from earlier. But now I'll do a full rendition of the second half of the onion. If you find it hard to chop your onion, you don't necessarily have to keep cutting it like this. You could always just turn it on its side if it's easier to cut. Now for this last one, this can be really tough, so you really want to make sure to be careful. If it's thin enough like so, you can use it like this. So now we're going to put our actual onions into the pot. But before you would do that, you typically put your oil in. This oil cup is completely empty because I already put my 1 cup of oil in for preheating, so that's why nothing came out of there. So now we're going to take our onions and just slide them in. You might have some drippage, that's okay. I'm not exactly the neatest chef. Just drop those in. You just take your knife that you use for chopping to make sure they all get evenly coated and nice on the bottom. What's really interesting about onions is they originally seem huge and thick and imposing, but then they get smaller and they become brown and tender and really nice. So we'll just make sure those get all in there coated, and they're get nice and golden brown. So this is on medium heat, this oil. So there's not really an exact time for the onions, it's more of you have them going while you do the steps. Moving on to our next step, we're going to take our meat. Take our meat and put it nice and on. I have this preheated, which is why it's sizzling immediately. This griddle here is preheated right at medium heat. First you want to get all your meat on. Then you want to put your nutmeg on. This is 2 pounds of meat right here, right on our griddle. So the correct amount of nutmeg to use is something my family really likes. It is about a tablespoon, but you can use a little less. So you just want to make sure to get it nice and all on your meat. Something you really want to avoid are huge clumps of nutmeg. After you put our nutmeg on, you want to make sure to chop up your meat. Get it nice and chopped. And you want to make sure to get your nutmeg spread nice and around. Now, if you need less sugar in your diet, then you can put a little, then it's absolutely fine to put a little less nutmeg. But always make sure that you have enough nutmeg for your meat. If you have less meat, then use less nutmeg. If you have more meat, then use more nutmeg. You want to chop this up and use taco, and like it's taco meat. And you're going to have leftover meat in the supplies, like tomato sauce. My family, when we have leftover meat, we like to use it for tacos and things like that, because the lasagna meat is really yummy. Or you could even, you can use the meat for other dishes as well. But what I like to use generally this meat for is tacos with my family. Make sure the meat gets nice and chopped up. And you're all gonna have excess tomato sauce when you make a lasagna as well. What my family really likes to do is use that excess tomato sauce for pizza. But then again, we also like a lot of excess sauce on the lasagna because when you reheat lasagna, we don't want it to be dry. Now that I've chopped up my meat, I'm just gonna leave this to be, let it be and leave it brown. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna start putting our diced tomatoes and our tomato sauce and tomato paste and sugar into the onions. I'll just give these onions a brief stir to make sure that they don't get burnt on the bottom of the pan. Those onions are looking a little thick to me and not exactly golden brown yet, so we're just gonna put the heat up higher. Those stir with our meat brown. Chop up and actually on there. Also, make sure not to get oil on yourself. So it looks like our onions are done. Now we're going to start putting everything else in. So first in comes our whole diced tomatoes. This is only one can. Remember, you need 2 of these for the actual amount of lasagna sauce in the 9-quart pan. You don't necessarily need a large 9-quart pan to make the tomato sauce, but it's really useful when you have a 9-quart pan because it makes everything a lot less sloppy. Handy tip that you can use: get the tablespoon thing they use for your nutmeg. And then you can just scoop the tomato paste out. If you can't bang it out of the can. Notice our meat is getting nice and brown and juicy and yummy and cooking in its own fat while we're making the tomato sauce. I really like how the beef uses its own fat to cook. Stir that all in. You can use a tablespoon container briefly for that. You might have some excess left over in your tomato paste, that's okay. But something that you don't want excess in is your tomato sauce. So a really nice tip that you can use here is you can take a little bit of water from your sink. Just a little, that's all you need. You sploosh it around inside like so. Sploosh, sploosh, sploosh around. And then what you actually do is you pick up some of the unused tomato sauce from the can that normally would go to waste, but then you can just put it in with diluted water. Sploosh, sploosh, sploosh. Make sure you don't get any soap in there. Now that we've got all of our sauce materials in there, what we can do is now we can take our 2 teaspoons, not tablespoons, teaspoons of sugar and put them in. But for this, we're just going to use 1. You can do a little less or a little more, but we're using 1 for the shortening condensed tomato sauce. Now we're going to stir this all nice and around, like nice and thick, with our onions and our tomatoes, our water in there that we used to make sure we got extra tomato sauce. And we're just going to let this sit. If we notice here, we've got our meat cooking as well. You want to make sure this gets nice and turned, and make sure all sides get nice and brown. See how this is starting to look like hamburger meat? I really like that comparison because it kind of is hamburger meat. And we're gonna end it here for now. Let this cook, and then we're going to assemble our lasagna. Thank you so much for watching, everyone.